Evening, folks. Well, today I made this little drill guide. Hopefully will help me drill some holes straight. 1/2 inch steel from one of my test plates at school. I think it turned out alright, but I tried to stamp the numbers in there with one of those 3/8 steel stamping sets. Definitely a little trickier than I gave it credit for. Those numbers are kind of wonky, but I think it'll serve its purpose. So that's kind of what I was up to earlier. But I got thinking a little bit about the video I made yesterday, and I think there were some solid points that I made, but I want to elaborate on some of them a little bit more, and this will only be kind of an introduction to some of this stuff, but I just kind of had it on my mind, and I wanted to talk some of this stuff out a bit more because I think it's important, and I think it does matter. And our society today is very opinionated. We've kind of have this idea that all opinions are equally valid. We have moral relativism and stuff like that. There's no right or wrong. There's no objective truth, and that's harmful and it's dangerous. And I'm hopefully going to try and explain a little bit why I think that. And having your own opinion is one thing. Everybody has their own opinions, and certainly you have the right to have your own opinion and express it. But you need to keep in mind about freedom of speech. Everybody likes to tout freedom of speech, but you need to keep in mind that, one, people are not obligated to listen to your opinion, and two, you're not free from whatever consequences arise from your use of free speech. And so those are just a couple basic points on it, but I like to go a little bit deeper than just what opinions people have, because to me it matters why you believe something. And there's a lot of talk all the time. We need to respect everybody's opinions. We need to respect everybody's thoughts on stuff, which that's all well and good. But personally, I have qualifications for that. Those being that, one, you actually need to believe in something. You need to understand what you believe. And secondly, you need to be able to defend that. And there's plenty of people who I would mostly agree with as far as their political and religious views and such. But like, I don't really respect those opinions, even if they coincide with my own, because they can't defend them, and it's an ill-informed opinion, although it may be the right opinion. Like, I can have an honest conversation with like a communist who really knows their little red book and has read up on the philosophy, or I can have an honest conversation with a very pious Muslim, even though we disagree on pretty much everything. That can be an honest conversation. But a lot of these people who are touting free speech and my opinion matters and stuff like that, they have no basis for what they believe. And again, even people who agree with me. Throughout my life, there's two groups of people in particular who have always just really annoyed me, despite the fact that I'm generally in agreement with them. Now I consider myself a patriotic person. I do love this country. I think the founding was good and moral and just, and I care about the future of this country. And there's a lot of people who love America, but I've always been irritated by the sort of patriotic people who don't really have much of a basis for that. Like, they don't understand these founding principles, and they can't articulate or defend it. And I'm talking about the people who are like, "Oh, America, fuck yeah, America's the best." And the other side of it, the religious side, is for lack of a better term, the Jesus freaks. And I'm a deeply religious person myself, but these people have always bothered me. Just, you know the types, the door knockers, or the people who are just like, "Oh, you just need to welcome Jesus in your heart as your personal Lord and Savior, and He will save you, and He will love you, sweet tender baby Jesus." Like, both those people have always bothered me. Just despite the fact that if we laid all these opinions out on a checklist, we would probably check a lot of the same boxes. So why do I take issue with that? Because a lot of times these people, to me at least, seem to have just, and for sake of argument, we'll say that these are right opinions. They seem to have just stumbled upon them. And in a lot of ways, for a lot of people, I think that is rooted in a sort of narcissism or overly like self-love, like self-infatuation almost. Of course, the manifestation of that being like, "Oh, well, I love myself. I'm the best, and I'm from America, so America must be the best country." And maybe that opinion is correct, but there needs to be a deeper meaning for it. There needs to be a true basis for believing that. And we've lost a lot of that in our age of relativism and subjectivism, and all opinions matter, and there is no truth but the truth you make yourself. And society cannot function that way, and we're seeing more every day the effects of that that lack of a foundation. And so I want to get into that a little bit more. Um, I kind of want to talk more about rights, where they come from, why they matter, and also touch on the American exceptionalism thing again. And I guess we'll start off with that kind of historically speaking. Again, the reason why the term American exceptionalism refers to America being the exception to the rule. And again, the rule was that guy's the king. You do what the king says, literally under pain of death. And you could just think throughout history, think over all the thousands of years of human history before the American Revolution. Think of how many countless millions of people have been wantonly slaughtered for little more than the petty pride of some selfish leader. All right? That untold millions have just marched to their deaths for little more than the pride of some dickhead in charge. And it reminded me of this book that I read a year or two ago, Alexander the Great: Journey to the End of the Earth by Norman F. Cantor. This was a great read. It's pretty much a biography of Alexander the Great and his conquest, and it is totally outrageous the way these people live their lives. And they were completely trashed, like pretty much all the time. Not just a little tipsy. I'm talking they were fucking hammered. And not only were they fucking hammered, but they commanded huge armies that swept across half the world, just conquering and killing and pillaging. And again, for little more than the pride of somebody who happened to be in charge. That was the rule. That was the old rule. That was the rule that we were the exception to. And in a lot of ways, in today's society, we've kind of gone too far in the other direction. Back then, it was this sort of just these selfish, violent, megalomaniac whack jobs who they're the only people who mattered in their country, and everybody else, had to bow to the whim of these people. And then today, it's kind of like the opposite. It's like anything goes, any opinion matters, and anyone can be right. Anything is true, and the issue with that is it's simply not a foundation that a society can be based on. And kind of going back to the whole topic of rights, people want to call healthcare right, they want to call this a right, or they want to say there are no rights. And if we go to the founding, that this country was founded on, that there are inherent, unalienable rights that all human beings have by virtue of their humanity alone. All people have unalienable rights, inalienable rights, and they have inherent dignity simply because of their humanity, because they are human persons. And that we take for granted because it was a few hundred years ago we founded the country on that, and a lot of other countries have followed suit. But that is a revolutionary idea, and in a lot of ways, and people don't like this because people don't like God and stuff, that in a lot of ways has its roots in Christianity. It is almost a patently Christian idea that all human persons have dignity and worth and inalienable rights that cannot be taken away. So this topic of rights is a lot deeper than just some guys wrote it on the document to found a random country at a random time in history. It's much deeper than that, and the implications of it are they're important, and a lot of people just they haven't been exposed to this sort of material, or they've just never thought about it. And I think that's an issue because when there's no basis for any of this stuff, then it's meaningless in a lot of ways. And of course, in the Constitution, the Declaration, they reference the Creator, that these inalienable rights, this dignity of all human persons by virtue of their humanity comes from the Creator. And you can argue about religion, what's right, what's wrong, but the point of it is that it comes from something bigger than any one individual person, almost larger than all of humanity combined. And because of that divine origin, it is inalienable. It cannot be stripped away, and it cannot be argued away. And a lot of people, I assume, just think that it's almost just a social construct. That, we're just going to say that people have all these rights and they can't be taken away, they're inalienable, and they all have dignity, because society kind of sucks when people are killing each other and people are stealing your cattle and your sheep, and and your wives, and this dickheaded king is sending you off to war because he was mad that the other king, took his bride or whatever. And like there have been countless people who have died over squabbles that are that petty. And when you reduce it to a social construct like that, a societal invention, if you will, then it doesn't have that meaning to it, and it can be argued away in a lot of cases. It can be, if that is your view of it, then the individual human person can be subjugated to a king or an ideology. We saw a lot of this in the 20th century, that the individual was subservient to the state, to the leader, the ruler, the king, or the state religion even. And so it's pretty dangerous, and I would just say it's wrong to just kind of say that rights are just a made up thing, or that they just have their origin in societal constructs. So now there's a lot of people in the modern day who find the very idea of God or religion or objective morality, that is true at all times for all individuals, objective morality. And if morality is not objective, then I would argue that it's really not morality in actuality. I think a necessary component of morality is that it is objective and binding for all human beings. But anyway, a lot of people today, they find this idea of objective truth limiting or imprisoning, that it's holding them back, and that they should be free to create their own meaning for their own lives. And that's, on its face, it's maybe an attractive idea, that because all humans seek meaning and purpose. That's kind of like the human condition. Why are we here? What should I do? How should I live my life? That's kind of like the big question of humanity. And these people, particularly those who have like an atheistic worldview, they find the idea of God as limiting their freedom, their choices, and their lives, what they want to do. So they say, well, I find it invigorating because I can make my own meaning for my own life and my own morality and my own standards and codes. And that's illusory, because if you read people like Nietzsche or some of these earlier atheists, not like the couch potato armchair atheists we see online now, but like the earlier philosophical atheists who really like fought with this question, the conclusion that they came to was that if there is no God, that there is no meaning. Not that you can create your own meaning, is that any meaning is illusory. And that's kind of a tough thing to really comprehend and deal with, because part of our nature as humans is to seek meaning and purpose. We derive happiness from a sense of purpose, from a sense of meaning. And if that's just a social construct, if it's just a byproduct of the evolutionary process, I would say, one, that's kind of a poor mutation, because it's probably led to, a lot more problems than it's solved, if really our sole purpose is to, eat fine food and, reproduce. If that's our sole purpose, then I would venture to say that this whole philosophical quest for meaning has really done more harm than good, if we are to believe that it is merely a social construct or the result of the evolutionary process. So it is illusory to believe that you can create like your own meaning in the sense that like there are things that are true for you and not true for other people in a philosophical sense, in the sense that natural rights are based off of. And so not only can they just be argued away by the leader or subjugated, in a society that doesn't recognize them, but it goes kind of deeper than just government. And it really kind of picks at the question of who we are as humans and what our purpose is and our meaning and how we should live our lives. And the reason that these inalienable rights, these God-given, self-evident, unalienable rights that are endowed to all humans by their Creator, by virtue of their humanity, the reason that it is listed in there is because government has historically been a huge violator of these natural rights. So the reason that they are present in the founding documents, this sort of language, is not because they were trying to form a theocracy. All the contrary, I would think that the founders would say that theocracy is probably a poor form of government, and I would tend to agree. You know, religious as I am, I don't want a theocracy. I think that's a poor form of government, even if it's the right religion. But the reason it's in there is because the Constitution, as a legal document, is a restriction on the powers of government, precisely because the tendency of government, of those in power, again, going back to what the old rule was before we became the exception to that rule, those in power would seek to alienate these rights of individuals, of the citizens, of the common people. And so the reason that this sort of divine origin is included in there is not because they were trying to form a state religion or anything like that. It's to make the point of how important, how vital these rights are to humanity, that because they are so vital and so important and crucial to our lives and well-beings and philosophical meaning as humans, because it's so critical, this is why we are placing these restrictions on the powers of the government, of the state, of the ruler. That's why those powers are there. So it's setting the backdrop for the limit on the government. It's not trying to form a state religion. People get all wrapped up about separation of church and state, separation of church and state. Well, you want to tax the churches, so I don't know how that would be, separation of church and state. But what that really means in basic terms is the government will not endorse a religion. There will not be a state religion, and there's not a state religion here. Okay, there's a lot of wacky mega church pastors and stuff like that, but it's not the state religion. So, yeah, you can forget about that. But that is the reason for this sort of language, and it's because they understood how vital this was to our purpose, our lives as human beings, and that's why they sought to limit the powers of the government, because of these tendencies. Read the Federalist Papers, all right? There's just countless works written on all this stuff, and people hardly ever crack a book on it, yet they hop online and then just like spout off these opinions like they know something. And I'm not saying I'm right at everything. I'm probably not. I've probably made some errors in this video or said some silly stuff, but like I'm just out there trying to get some little bit more informed opinions out there, because everybody is just going out there. Let's just call healthcare a right. Let's just call it a right and make it a right. Calling it a right doesn't make it a right. It won't make medicine appear. It won't heal all the sick people, all right? It's not a magic talisman, and there's a lot more things at play than just what we pass for our laws or whatever. Like, a lot of this stuff comes into play. So, I mean, read up on it. Read up on it and try and have an informed opinion, okay? Don't be one of these Team America whack jobs who only loves the United States because they're from the United States. Don't be one of these Jesus freaks who was like, that's great, you're on fire for the zeal of Christ, but you have to understand that's not a reason for me to share that belief with you. The fact that you're on fire with the love of Christ, it does not mean that, like, it's not going to convince me to do that. You have to have a basis for your opinions, and again, this goes for anyone. If you totally disagree with my opinions, hey, that's fine. You have the freedom to do that. But all I'm asking is that be able to articulate and defend your opinions. Don't have an ill-informed opinion and act like it's equal to other people's. All right, well, that was a good bit of talking, but it's good stuff. All right, I love talking about this stuff, and I just because I do care and I do think it's important. I just want to try and articulate this stuff a bit more, because we're so wrapped up in party politics and who wants this and who wants that and the guns and the this and the that, and like that's all fun. That's all fun to talk about. I'm not saying it's not important, but there's a much deeper philosophical and theological root to all of this. The central question of why all of this matters, and I think everybody just kind of gleans over it. And like, certainly there's arguments from an economic perspective why we should organize our society in a certain way, because it's better for society. It creates a more safe, prosperous, successful society, and that's more on the economic side. And I'd like to do a video on that sometime. But as far as these rights, this question of American exceptionalism, that has a much deeper philosophical root that people just don't take into consideration, and I think it's a shame because I think a lot hinges on that question, and I wish people would try and be a little bit more informed about it instead of just ignoring lessons of history. Well, all right, that's all I got for now. I don't want to be here all night. It was a good talk, though. Y'all take care.